Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We are hoping to get Andrei Martyanov, the Russian military expert, on with us today. We're having some challenges making the link up. Hopefully, we're going to be able to get him in during this show. But in the meantime, we're going to continue moving forward, and he'll join us as soon as we're able to make that happen. The title of today's show is that Russia seems poised for a major new offensive. As we're talking more and more about negotiated settlement, whether we're going to get a ceasefire, whether we're going to get something to end this at relatively good terms for Kyiv or not, all those things are still swirling in the mix. But in the process of this, now there seems to be getting more and more question about whether the Russians actually do want a negotiated end or not. You may recall, let's back up just a little bit. When Trump was elected, he had said that he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia war in a day. As soon as he got into office, he would get it done. And then once he got in, he's like, well, okay, maybe 100 days. And you may recall General Keith Kellogg, his emissary to try and end the war, said, yeah, we've said 100 days is our total. Okay, so obviously it's a lot more difficult. I don't know that he ever actually meant one day, but we always assumed that meant he was going to try and get it done really quickly. But then I think once he got into office and he realizes, okay, this is a lot more complex than I thought, now than 100 days, which is still pretty fast. You're talking about a negotiated end to a war, but now then we're getting close to that that time limit as well. I think April 30th is actually the 100th day of his administration. So the question is, where is this going? Now, you may recall, though Trump has been saying he was going to get the war negotiated over with from the beginning, you had especially Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov, who both emphatically said several times in December and January that there would be no ceasefire, that there would be no pause or any kind of truce, as I think Sergei Lavrov used. There's only going to be negotiations. They said they absolutely wanted negotiations. They were eager to talk to Trump because they hadn't been able to talk to anybody else in the United States or much of the West throughout the course of this war, but that they're willing to have a negotiated settlement. But they're not going to do a truce, they said, because that would only advantage the Ukrainian side. And they said they've had a lot of bad experiences with the Minsk agreements, with the failed Istanbul talks in April 2022. They said, we're not going to go down that path again. So they have the military advantage, and so they were going to press that. But then when Trump came in and he actually talked to Vladimir Putin, he got him to agree to, okay, we'll discuss the possibilities of a ceasefire. But you may recall that Putin put a lot of conditions on that, nuances, as he called them. They were much more than nuances, but basically some major gives would have to be required on the Ukraine side and on the Western side before they would agree to even a temporary and a partial ceasefire. At least but with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, with Steve Witkoff and a number of other interlocutors, and Trump himself, the United States was able to get Russia to say, all right, we're considering we'll consider a full ceasefire, but first we'll actually look at having a very limited ceasefire, one in the Black Sea and then another one on energy infrastructure. That has never been, neither one of those have been fully implemented. Actually, I'm not sure they've been implemented at all, as there's lots of disputes between what the Ukraine side claims is on or off limits, what the Russian side claims is on or off limits. And in fact, you've had both sides accuse the other of, we're keeping it, but the other side isn't. And yet there's evidence that neither side is keeping it. It's pretty clear that is. So the real question that we need to get into, first of all, does Russia actually want a ceasefire of any kind at all? And I think the more you get into it and the further we get along without any agreement on this, and by the way, it's clear that the Ukraine side doesn't want a ceasefire either. Volodymyr Zelensky had to be pulled kicking and screaming to get even a tacit, a verbal agreement that he would agree to seek a full ceasefire. You may recall that came after some very tense negotiations with the United States in Saudi Arabia. And going into that meeting, Zelensky had said, we're only interested in the kind of ceasefire we want, which is a ceasefire in the air and on the sea, because that would benefit them. It would disadvantage Russia. Russia said, no, we're not doing that. In fact, the United States said, I need you, Ukraine, to agree that you're going to seek a full 30-day ceasefire across the board. And so Zelensky said, okay, fine, we'll do that, because he really didn't have much of a choice. That's what the U.S. said they wanted. That's what we ended up coming out with verbally. But then you see that Zelensky, all the time we've been covering this since, has done everything he can to poo-poo on the deal, to say, oh, Russia's violating it left and right. And almost every day he makes some other video claiming that Russians are doing this and that, totally silent on all the things that the Ukraine side is doing in some major ways to violate it, which, of course, if you're the senior partner in this, the Russian side that has the power, they're not going to be very incentive to move towards the ceasefire if they see that the junior partner continues to violate it. They're naturally going to do more because they have more capacity on that. And I think that when you start to looking at these things all together, it's becoming more and more apparent to me that neither the Russians nor the Ukrainian side, for very different reasons, want a ceasefire. Now, I think that the Russians do want to end the war. So I think that they are very sincere about wanting a negotiated settlement, as long as that negotiated settlement, and this was reiterated on Russian media earlier today that I saw, as long as all of their details and all of their conditions are met, then they'll have a negotiated ceasefire. But evidence is starting to pile up that in the event that negotiations don't work, they will solve their problem militarily. Now, on Saturday, Secretary of State Rubio was asked questions concerning the Russia-Ukraine war, and he was asked specifically about the issue of the ceasefire and where that was going. But toward the end of this soundbite that we're going to show here, he also talks about what could come next.
Ultimately, this is a war. Right now, things are going to be blowing up in Ukraine and inside of Russia because there's still a war going on. That's what we're trying to end. Okay, if we have a true ceasefire, which is what we wanted, a complete ceasefire, nothing should be blowing up. But the Russians didn't agree to that. They wanted a partial. And then obviously when you get into these partials, that's one of the reasons why we didn't push for a partial. We'll take it because it's better than nothing. But one of the reasons why we didn't push for a partial, because there's always disputes about what are you hitting and what you're not hitting. But in the end, this is still a war. And we want it to stop. The fact that religious sites are being hit, or energy sites are being hit, or civilian sites are being hit, that's why war is a bad thing. And that's why the president wants to end it. As far as them conducting another campaign, well, then that'll be a very clear sign, right? If all of a sudden we wake up tomorrow and the Russians are launching a massive offensive, then I think that's a pretty clear sign they're not interested in peace.
Okay, if you wake up and there's a massive offensive, yeah, that's a pretty good indicator. I don't think that was just a rhetorical statement. I don't think he was just saying, well, obviously, if this happens, then they're not. I think that's more a statement of, we're seeing evidence build up, and we've continued to see evidence, even at the level that we can see of the open source information, whether that's the news media on both the U.S. Or the Western and the Russian side, Telegram channels, social media, etc. Some of these services like Military Summary Channel, which publish stuff that used to only be seen in top secret security vaults, now are evident and visible because of civilian capabilities and drones and videos and all that kind of stuff. Lots of evidence are that there is a buildup of the Russian forces, and the fact that Russia is not at all interested in trying to hurry things along. They're not in a rush because they, I think, are still to the point that there's not as much to gain negotiations as there is in the military realm. Things seem to continue to be moving in that direction. And NATO Secretary Mark Rutte also seems to be not willing to acknowledge the reality, although he kind of does. Now, in this clip I'm about to show you over the weekend, also, he was asked on CBS News Face the Nation regarding that soundbite from Rubio I just mentioned there, where he says, well, this is a temporary partial ceasefire is probably the best that we're going to get. I think the statement he used was better than nothing, this ceasefire. So he was asked, Mark Rutte was, Rubio said this is better than nothing, but they're not getting a lot. She said, does this mean that Russia is calling the shots when it comes to negotiations?
No, I'm not, because I spoke with Mark Rubio. I'm in regular contact with the other members of the American administration. I think you guys are really trying step by step to get to a situation where this war can end. But of course, the Russians also have to dance the tango, and at this moment they don't seem to do so, and then it will be difficult. But the fact that you guys are trying, that the American administration, with all the power you can project on the world stage, you are trying this because we know that the front line was moving in the wrong direction. We know that this war was moving in the wrong direction. This was not going to end well, and already so many people were dying. So I really commend the American effort.
Okay, so to reinforce, the specific question that he was asked was, is Putin calling the shots when it comes to negotiations? And he never answered the question. Oh, well, he did emphatically start off and say, no, I don't think that's the case. But then everything else he said there made it sound like that is the case. And in fact, he didn't even address who's calling the shots. He literally didn't even answer the question. This guy is a consummate politician, which means he will answer the question that he wants to answer regardless of the question asked. And that's what happened right here. But he did say a couple of other curious things. He says, first of all, well, look, these negotiated settlements, it takes two to tango. The Russians have to dance to the tango too. Well, they don't. They don't have to dance to any tango. Russia has the dominant position on the battlefield. They have the dominant position tactically, operationally, strategic, economically, industrially, every category that matters in war, they've got it. So they don't have to. That's the reason why they're not in a hurry. That's the reason why Vladimir Putin, which was reiterated again on Russian media today, that he initially said there wouldn't be a ceasefire. I think probably that's still the case. I think that it was always the case. I think that even though he said that, all right, we'll consider this, and they have been very careful in how they phrased that, we are willing to consider a full ceasefire as long as, and then they keep having these as long as details, which are almost impossible for the Ukraine side to agree to. And so far, that's been accurate because it's not only that the U.S. hadn't agreed to it, Ukraine hadn't agreed to it. Because I think my opinion is that Russia recognizes that Zelensky is no longer a rational actor and cannot see the truth and the reality on the ground. And so I think they're counting on him not agreeing to the terms that they laid out. If he did, then it would have put Russia in a difficult position. Now they would have had to actually take the consideration of a ceasefire and maybe have a negotiated settlement that's not their maximalist positions. But I think that they have calculated that the Ukraine side is not going to be willing to do that. And then you see the U.S. side. Obviously, Trump wants to get this thing negotiated, but he doesn't want to do it in a way that makes him look weak, that makes it look like he's literally handing everything over to the Russian side. That's inherent in the question that Mark Rutte was asked by U.S. media over the weekend. Is Russia calling the shots? Now, if Donald Trump just says, okay, fine, whatever you guys want, we'll just do it, we'll agree to it, we'll get it off the table. Then, of course, he's going to come under lots of pressure and accusations that he literally folded to the Russian side. Now, I think that that's going to happen no matter what. Even if he came up with a plausibly good deal for the Ukraine, best under these bad conditions, which, by the way, there's no good outcome for Ukraine. That doesn't exist. But there is a less odious version that could be if some skilled negotiators were trying to make some things happen. Now, it doesn't appear that even that is having any results so far. So I think that Trump is going to end up getting to the position to where he's not able to just say yes. And I think then this comment by Rubio over the weekend is an indicator that this is where Trump is getting to in his mind when he specifically mentioned, now, if we wake up and there's this big offensive on the Russian side, then that's going to indicate they don't want peace. What he didn't say in the rest of that clip was that, and if they do, then that means we're going to take these other bad actions. He just said, well, then that means they don't want peace. So I think that the Trump administration is starting to signal that they're getting to the place right now where if they can't get the Ukraine side to agree to what they want, or that the Trump administration can't find a plausible negotiated path that Russia could accept that won't make Trump look bad, that they may be willing to just let events take their course on the battlefield. One of the other things that Mark Rutte in that clip I just showed you there, that he said, we have to acknowledge that the front line is moving in the wrong direction. Okay, that's some progress, because up to this point, they seem to have gone out of their way not to admit the self-evident, obvious, that there are things going in the wrong direction. So he says that wasn't going to end well. That's what Rutte just said. Moving in the wrong direction, and left alone, things aren't going to end well. That's accurate. But then you get to the point that because that is the reality, that the other side doesn't have to, quote, dance to your tango music. They're going to tell you what the tango music is, and you get to choose whether you're going to go with it or whether you're not. Because the way things are shaping up, that the Russians are presenting the West with an option that you can dance to our tango music, which is these odious and onerous negotiated end, which means all of the territory of the four oblasts, the withdrawal of the Ukraine military out of areas they currently control, the surrender of a lot of their military so that they become demilitarized and only have 85,000 troops. They currently have somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000, and that there has to be new elections so that there's somebody besides Zelensky, or even if Zelensky, but there has to be somebody elected president to sign the deal. All of that takes a lot of time and is a tremendously difficult thing for anyone in the West or Ukraine to actually agree to, which seems to, again, get back to the point that it looks to me like the Russians are preparing and planning to do exactly what Rubio said and launch a large offensive. A lot of evidence supports that potential, not the least of which is the U.S. Intelligence community and its annual threat assessment, which about a week and a half ago came out and said that even though the Russian President Putin will be unable to achieve the total victory he envisioned when initiating the large-scale invasion in February 2022, Russia retains momentum as a grinding war of attrition plays to Russia's military advantages. This grinding war of attrition will lead to a gradual but steady erosion of Kyiv's position on the battlefield, regardless of any U.S. or allied attempts to impose new and greater cost on Moscow. Now, the last part of that makes the first part a little odd when you say there that Russia retains the momentum as a grinding war of attrition plays to Russia's advantages, but then you start by saying, even though Russian President Putin will be unable to achieve his total victory. Look, that I'm not. I guess they put that sentence in there to try to soften the blow, because everything else that followed that matches what we've been telling you on this channel throughout the entire war. All the advantages are on the Russian side, and by the definition of what they wrote there and the remainder of it, they're going to be able to eventually grind down the Ukraine side, even if there is no big aero offensive. If they continue on there, and they could go on for years this way. The Russian side could. They're not under any time constraints. They can continue going on short, but they may at some point come in with something even bigger. Now, I see on the bottom of the screen there, we have Andrei Martyanov back on the screen here. We're really grateful that we got that worked out, because we're getting into part of the show that I really want your expertise on here. So,
well, I was ready for noon Seattle times, which is 3 p.m. And then I see that thing and like, okay. So
whoops. Well, I'm sorry we got our wires crossed on that, but in any case, I'm glad you're able to join us here.
Sure,
because,
my pleasure.
One of the things we've been talking about up to this point in the episode so far is that while the Russian side says that they're willing to talk about some negotiated settlement as long as all these terms are met, their actions on the battlefield make it look more like they don't expect that to work, and that they're preparing for large-scale operations. Now, as this annual threat assessment from the U.S. Intelligence Agency I just put up on the screen there a second ago, we concede that Russia retains the momentum of a grinding war of attrition. It plays to Russia's advantages. So the question that I have, that a lot of people have, is Russia actually preparing to win this on the battlefield, or are they still thinking that they can get it through negotiations?
Well, it's both, honestly. Hello?
Yeah. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's both. As your friend Douglas McGregor correctly nailed it, Russians do not want to rule Ukraine. They do things which, they primarily annihilate whatever is left of the armed forces of Ukraine. And then after that, the military victory has been already achieved. It's just the matter of the, how to put it, it's arrangement, as I call it, arrangement phase. Is just how you arrange things. For example, many people ask all the time, oh, what about Odessa and Nikolaev? Hey, if it's not given up through the diplomatic means and the means of negotiations, for example, like they have a very high level of autonomy on the new arrangement, whatever will be left of Ukraine, which eventually means down the road they will be voting to, for independence and eventually joining Russia. That's one of the tracks, essentially, of negotiations. If not, Russians can go there and do it by military means. So in this case, it's just teeter-totter in a sense, what we do militarily on the battlefield, how it affects our position, not position, the position is clear, how it affects the dynamics of the negotiations, because they can do, I use this phrase, and I'm sorry that I'm using this phrase, Russian diplomats are two best in the world in pulling the cat by the gonads. This is what Russian diplomacy exists for: to go out and engage into this never-ending discussion, and then, of course, getting the call from Moscow saying, oh, okay, yeah, we have this thing, just give them this information, and that obviously changes the mood and the dynamics. In terms of military, in the end, the main political objective of this war is to remove the regime in Kyiv, which is essentially, well, it's a puppet of NATO, and it is, well, neo-Nazi one.
And there's additional information coming out, and some from comments from the Russian side, others from examples. What we see apparently building up on the Russian side of the lines here. First of all, I want to go to something that Vladimir Putin said. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, sometime in March, where he kind of made a bit of a startling statement. That he said that Zelensky's removal is one thing, but then they want to finish off the Ukraine troops, which didn't sound very diplomatic, or that's where he was putting his onus. Is this just Putin trying to put pressure for diplomatic, or is he actually stating, no, we may just finish this militarily?
No, he means it. To finish off whatever Ukrainian armed forces are today, whatever iteration of them are. And it's not diplomatic, or Putin never says anything just because he wants to say. He, apart from being a high-level intelligence person, and then don't forget he was also director of FSB, and he was in the Foreign Intelligence Service for many years. He is a lawyer. He is very prudent at what he says and how he frames things. That is why when you listen to his speech, he's unlike me. He's pretty slow, because he knows every word he says will be immediately interpreted in some way. And so he tries to express himself as prudently as possible. No, the question is, yes, absolutely. The purely military objective is to finish off armed forces of Ukraine. As such, they shouldn't exist. And this is what happens every day right now. This is their military objective. And as I already stated, the first-hand knowledge that Russian armed forces were told 2025 is still the year of the combat. After that, we go into the purely political settlements and whatever will be decided during these negotiations. And but no, it's and the question here, I know I said it many times, and it sounds horrible, and I know it sounds horrible, but this is essentially of removing the sperm from which the new Ukrainian, so to speak, nation, if you want, will respond again, because many people do not understand the mood in Russia, and overwhelming majority of Russian people. They do not want to have anything in common with Ukraine and Ukrainians. That is why, for example, again, one of the huge executive orders Putin signed 2 weeks ago, and it was applauded across whole of Russian society, is the fact of the changing of the status of the Ukrainian refugees on Russian territory. And people understand, by allowing many of them, you're essentially importing their sleeper cells. And we already have the proof of it. We already have the instances of the terrorist acts, over all kinds of things. And then suddenly he signs this order that those who are not registered and those who are not, especially those of the young people who are not registered for the service, get out of the country. That is why those famous Sheremetyevo checkpoint right now, Sheremetyevo airport, they have people who are staying there for days, and Russian border guards do not allow them in the country. And one of the most popular thing in Ukrainian society today is to remove every single social network, phrases, comments, and things like that, which say, "Oh, kill those Russians, kill Russian children," and things like that. So they clear their phones all the time. So they go to Sheremetyevo and present usually the phone, smartphone, which of course is required to be shown, and it's empty. And by the way, which is essentially what indication that it was already cleaned from something which is, of course, very hostile to Russia and Russian people. And this is what happened. This is huge. And in this case, it projects itself to the battlefield. Can Russians go to Kyiv right now? They can. Why? So that's the whole point. Russians do not want to govern Ukraine. They want their government there, which will be essentially, we know it's going to be the puppet government. We know that that's what's going to happen. There will be no people from current political elite which will be present there. And after that, whatever the political process will go, so if you can do it by political means, if you can do it by essentially saving lives of your own soldiers and saving lives of civilians, that's what the Russian way of doing things right now is.
Now, in terms of the battlefield part and what that would mean, if they're not, you said if they're able to get it through diplomatic or political means, if not, and so far the answer has been not, because Zelensky has been not just the United States, but he's been dragging everybody's feet to not want to give in to a single one of the requirements that Putin has listed for even the ceasefire, much less an end of war negotiated settlement. So that makes it look more and more like it's going to be military. Well, there has been some recent news out. Gary, if you can toss up that one about the two front wars. This is a Russian media talking about something that the general staff of Ukraine fears that the Russian armed forces will launch a simultaneous offensive in the Sumy and Zaporizhia directions. And I looked again this morning at some of the tactical updates, and it does appear that at least right now in the Zaporizhia area, especially, that lots of actions are being taken behind the Ukrainian front lines that are symptomatic of what you would expect before there's a large-scale offensive. Previously, both Zelensky and other Western media has reported that there are large Russian buildup on the east beyond Zaporizhia and in the north around the Sumy area. So it looks like, at least on paper, that's something that could be in the offing. So first question that I have of you, how much time is Russia going to give to diplomacy or political outcome to achieve those objectives? Or when were they going to say, all right, that's it, it didn't work, now we're going to solve it militarily?
Difficult to say, because obviously we know now that there are behind the curtain channels of communications. Now, Mr. Dmitriev, who is the envoy, but he's primarily economic issues, and he was talking to Mr. Witkov 2 days ago. He was in Washington, D.C. So who knows what kind of information flow between the Americans and Russians is. But what is important, that in Sumy, I spoke about it today in my video, which should be up shortly. If you take a look at Sumy, it's pretty much good progress there. The Russians are already deep into the Sumy Oblast, and they are nearing Yunakovka, and this is not far from Sumy, city of Sumy itself. And my gosh, I looked at the videos from Sumy, and all those, assembly areas and ammunition depots. It's just complete devastation they wrought on them, on the armed forces of Ukraine. So Sumy is already the axis of the major movement. And there was a very interesting update from the people who are running the operation there, that people in Sumy are waiting for Russians. And that means what? There were already FSB and GRU, GU now is used to be GRU, people who were on the ground there, including inside the city of Sumy, and they took their proper polls. Obviously, they're undercover, but they know how to choose and select the sample and what is the sample size. And they say Sumy are ready to, for the Russian army. And so then, right now, from the furthest point, which Russians are already in Sumy region today, from this kind of angle of the border between Kursk region and Sumy is already more than 8 kilometers. They already took Basovka. They are going to Yunakovka. It's obvious. And the only road essentially is controlled, pretty much half of the road between Kursk and Sumy is controlled by Russian forces. So we already have that thing happening. And it's kind of, and as I stated 2 days or 3 days ago, I said, those smaller red arrows, which previously were there, they're becoming increasingly going from smaller to the mid-size arrows, red arrows. So can they, so Sumy we already know, Sumy are happening, and how, whatever the dynamics will be, we might see the even major thrust. Not that it's not major, but it could be, so to speak, amplified many times over. Per Zaporizhia, there is, it's not only Zaporizhia, it's in Dnepropetrovsk. The Russian DRGs, diversionary recon groups, are operating already on the right bank of Dnieper since like a couple months ago. So something is brewing there. Can they do is in Zaporozhye? Possible, absolutely possible.
So let me ask you something on that, because many of the critics who see some of these headlines, they just kind of roll their eyes and they said, "Oh, this is just a bunch of bluster on the Russian side," because they look at the map and they say, "Okay, it's taken now into the 4th year for Russia to go from 0 to where they are now, and it's whatever it is, 22% today." They look in the Pokrovsk area. They said they made a lot of progress through much of the end of 2024, but now then they're just, in fact, the Ukraine side did a couple of counterattacks and took back some of the area, which has now been recaptured. But overall, the progress hasn't been big. And so now that when they hear that Russia may conquer the rest, and when they hear Odessa or Kharkiv or possibly even push up to Kyiv, people say there's no way they can do that. In fact, one of the viewers on our channel here, Gary, if you can put that one up there, actually asked this earlier in the show here, which I think is a good question. He said, a Russian from Luhansk who served in the U.S. Army and has connections to the Russian command has said that Russia was afraid of a big aero offensive up until now. How do you answer all those critics who say that Russia has taken 3 years to go here, and it would probably take another 3 years to go even to the Dnieper River?
Wars are not fought for capturing territory. Capturing territory comes as the consequence of the wars. And that's what many people do not understand, and I constantly try to stress. Russians are not there to conquer all of Ukraine. They do not want to govern Ukraine. It just happens so that it is done for purely political purposes, and purely military purpose is to annihilate whatever is left of the Ukrainian armed forces. They are throwing this into the Russian meat grinder. Russians are gladly obliging. Some people still do not understand that their territory itself, while important under some circumstances, when you, for example, judge strategic offensive operations, which are its merely indication of their progress under current specific circumstances. Russian main political and military objective, military objective, let's put it this way, what general staff thinks about, and this is how Mr. Gerasimov goes to Mr. Putin and Security Council, Mr. Gerasimov being chief of general staff, it is about killing. You have to kill Ukrainian armed forces. And that's what Russians were doing very successfully with a tremendous deadly efficiency. But people who obviously do not have military background, who think that everything has to be, those big offensive, red arrows and things like that. The question is, okay, Russians take Kharkov, for example. Did anybody count what it will be to take the almost 2 million population city, very hostile, what it will result in? Many people will not be able to answer this question. I can tell you one thing: you will have to have the grouping of between 250 to 300,000 people just to get, to take Kharkov. Can Russians do that? Yeah. Will they do it? No. Why? Apart from the fact that you are taking the city, which is tremendously anti-Russian, and so you take the Kharkov. What are you going to do after that? Oh yeah, there is a garrison duties. Okay, how many people you need to garrison duties? My experience from Baku and what was happening there in end of 1980s, which was essentially a battlefield there, you need to have a couple divisions at least, apart from the local garrison, to have any kind of control of the city. Why would Russians do this now? They will not. They will continue to obliterate, trying to suck out the remnants of those reserves which they have. And we have indications of that. People do not look attentively at the critical operational and tactical data. You have 18-year-olds now on the front lines. Fact is, they caught one who was 14 years old. And now you have a whole formations on the level of company, which are women. So, and this people say, oh, yeah, let's go there. No, you sit there. Well, Russians do not sit, they still move. But, and then there is one thing. For Vladimir Putin and, Putin administration, let's put it this way, and especially Russia's Security Council. These are the people who conduct, strategic planning on the political level, and these are the people who run the country, essentially. It's not necessary to do this because it maintains a low level of casualties for Russian army. It is low, unlike Mr. Kavoly, of course. He thinks that Russians lose like 700,000 a day. So, but it allows to maintain low level of casualties. It allows to maintain cohesion of Russian society, and it allows, moreover, not to turn Russia into the full-blown war economy. Anybody who comes out and says that, oh, Russian economy is on the war footing, I have a bridge to sell them. Those people have no clue what war footing is. The same as they still do not get it after 3+ years. Why it is not a war, but special military operation. They do not understand the strategic difference, because God forbids if Russian army comes with war. There will be nothing left of Ukraine, okay? And Mr. Zelensky wouldn't exist, together with all his curators and SAS, guards who guard him. And when you explain this to people, that yes, this is a slow process, but it is effective and it's very efficient. And when you look attentively now at the numbers, do they even have an understanding that Ukraine started this whole thing in 2022 when Russia had to respond with special military operation? The population was around 40 million people. Right now, by different estimates, even Vladimir Putin says that. Even Mr. Medvedev say that, and they don't say those things lightly, is that probably population now around 19 to 20 million people. Twice. Ukraine lost half of its population just in the last 3 years as refugees. Europe is filled with them. My state of Washington, I remember last year we were going through going to the Yellowstone, and we stopped at the, there is such German village in Leavenworth called, it's Scandinavian and German, it's famous village. In the state of Washington, we stopped there and stayed there to eat sausages and things like that. Ukrainians everywhere. It's unbelievable. It's like they're literally everywhere, And so people do not understand that. They still have no grasp of this. This is a huge geopolitical event of the historical significance. And they still wait for some reason. They want to see this, Hollywood picture of the Hollywood picture is there. Many of those videos will not be allowed, and they are not allowed on the YouTube. If they want to see what Kursk area looks like, they killed there 72,000 people. They killed the whole combined arms army there. Many people still do not understand. They went in there and they lost their combined, massively powerful combined arms army. Their fields on Kursk right now, it's like from the other planet. Catastrophic, all littered with bodies and burnt equipment. And Russians just obliged. Okay,
yeah. So there's the concern is that could spread elsewhere. Now, on the one hand, there's people who, as I mentioned a minute ago, on the West say, well, Russia can't go any further than there is here. But there are others in the West that are actually worried about a lot more than that. And for some commentators coming out of Russia, there's reason for them to be afraid. But I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. But first of all, I want to look at this from the Estonians, because there's some worries that Russia could go into Estonia. Here's a report looking at the people in Estonia with some little interesting demographics that some people in the West are not aware of.
In Narva, several shelters have been set up in public buildings. If the sirens sound, the residents know where to take refuge. Everything is prepared. Estonia's new defense plan includes bunkers, anti-tank mines, and trenches along the 300-kilometer border with Russia. The aim is to stop or slow down the enemy in the event of an attack before the arrival of Allied forces.
The Narva River is all that separates these two countries. Estonia on the right, Russia on the left. If Vladimir Putin decides to attack a European country, it could be here in Narva, where 95% of its population is Russian-speaking. After the fall of the Soviet Union, they could choose their passports and are able to travel freely into Russia. The border remains open but well guarded. Some of the residents aren't afraid to share where they stand.
I live in Estonia, and I'm a citizen of the Russian Federation. Until 1991, we really lived without any borders, and everyone was happy.
Putin? Of course I support him. It's a no-brainer.
So now then you're talking about potentially not just a bordering country, but a NATO country that has Article 5, et cetera. First of all, let me just ask you, is that a legitimate potential that the Russian army could take Estonia?
Why? Why? It's France 24. French do not have normal media, same as UK. They are paranoid peddlers. Many of them are war criminals who have been actually pushing for the wider war. And so this idiotic idea, first this Suwalki Gap, this paranoia about Kaliningrad Oblast and things like that. Don't peddle paranoia. Everything will be fine. Why would Russians want to take these freeloaders, which Estonia is? It is a complete country, which if you look attentively at the demographics of those Baltic countries, you can look it up. It's very easy. It's a catastrophe. They lost half of the population, which simply died out or moved out. This is who they are. They are economic basket case, and the only thing they can sell to their masters, both in Brussels and Washington, is, this paranoia. French are being French. They hate Russian guts, so they spread this BS, the same as we talk about Washington Post or establishment media in the United States. Those people pushed for this war. And now when they begin to lose, what did they sell? They constantly sell paranoia. Russians are not interested in Estonia. Russians are interested in normal functioning of the state borders like, it used to be. I mean, just go through a little bit of the registration, a regular checkpoint, and you go through both ways. These idiots took it upon themselves. Scratch Estonian, you will have the Nazi collaborator, including SS formations, punitive formations. Estonia collaborated very much. They love their SS marches in Estonia, Latvia, in Lithuania. So, and they are now removing all monuments of the Red Army, and they don't call it liberation. Okay, that's fine. Why would the Russians want these people? They do not understand. I'll give you an example. There is this professor. She's teaching strategy, whatever that is, in U.S. Naval War College. Sarah Payne. I listened to her. She has no clue about Russia. She is absolutely clueless. Well, she's clueless on the military affairs too, because she has a degree in whatever, so. And when she talks to people and she spreads like, Putin's Russia is just dying out. Why doesn't he use those money which he uses on the special military operation to fix the roads? And my question to this in this case, when was the last time she was in Russia? I don't know. It's probably 20 years ago. She doesn't understand Russia has a highway system. Well, I mean, doesn't mean that Russians don't have bad roads, but she has no clue what Russia has become in the last 25 years. And these are the people who teach, for example, U.S. Officer Corps in the U.S. Naval War College. And you listen to this, it's just, good Lord, what alternative universe they live in. Same goes for those Baltic states. They are not needed. It means what? If Russia, what many people do not understand, Russians, in terms of standard living, they beginning to live better than most of the European countries. Those people have no clue. And then they go to Russia and they have this cognitive dissonance because they have to really live with this thing because they cannot believe what they're seeing. And they think that Russia is still stuck in 1990s.
Right. Yeah. And of course, you had Tucker Carlson, who famously went out there and showed a bunch of the stuff and talked about it. I've talked to Larry Johnson, who just came back from Russia not long ago, who tells the same kind of a story. So there's a lot of, and then in their minds.
Yeah, they kind of get into, they get on the highway, drive from Moscow to Kazan, and everybody, it's only Moscow. It's only St. Petersburg. No, it's most Russian cities like that.
Yeah.
And They cannot grasp this.
So let me ask you this though. So that's you're saying, why would Russia want to go into the Baltics? Militarily, I can see why they wouldn't need to, because the military, the combined total military capacity of the entire Balkans is like a few combat battalions with no experience or threat. So there's no real military threat there.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same case for some of the other NATO countries to the west. And there has been on the Russian media actually quite a lot of pretty brash talk. I may be saying his name wrong. Solovyov Live, I think.
Yes. Oh God.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's watch this.
Europe has always supported war. We didn't realize it in 2014. The Americans weren't directly participating in negotiations, but we didn't see that. In fact, this was a proxy war by the Americans. The Europeans were just waiting for their moment, and now it has come. They dream of a war with us. When Macron arrogantly says he doesn't need Russia's permission, that Ukraine, supposedly sovereign state, can request troop deployments, I say go ahead. Deploy wherever you want. We will kill you all. We will kill you all. Just like we killed everyone who come to the land of Kursk and didn't manage to escape or surrender. We will kill you all. If necessary, we will enter Paris.
So obviously that's feeding a lot of the paranoia in the West. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, he technically is not incorrect. I don't like Mr. Solovyov. I would never go on his show. I knew they were trying to get around me at some point of time, but no, but he is, if you remove the Paris part, why the hell Russians want to go to Paris? It's like, it's a crappy city now. It stinks with the urine. It's filled with the filth and crime. But the point is why? But other than that, sure, Mr. Macron changed already itself. Russians have now the new sport and bets. How many times Macron will change his position on the so-called peacekeepers? He changed it 18 times so far. So we go, then we don't go. So we go, then we don't go. And everybody knows it's a complete bluff. You know, militarily, as conventional forces, France is pathetic. It's not military power. And so they talk a lot. But Solovyov was responding to this emotionally, but actually he quoted by far more important and much more interesting and well-educated person as Mr. Tolstoy, who is the member of State Duma. Mr. Tolstoy being great-grandson of Leo Tolstoy, who wrote War and Peace. And he told correctly to these French morons who populate their media about a couple months ago, that some guy from whatever, the France, also 24, get in the French, for some reason think that they're so irresistible people. And Mr. Tolstoy told them, just openly, bring your peacekeepers, we'll kill them all. But yes, that's what Russia will do. But obviously Russians are not going to Paris. Why? For what purpose? And Mr. Solovyov probably was using this as a hyperbole. So, but the point is, no, Russians are not going to Paris. If Russia needs to really send a message, there are plenty of the intermediate range missiles which Russians can send with the, messages to Mr. Macron. And so, why? This is the whole point. So people still think in those terms of the 1812 or 1814 or even World War II. No, the war changed. You don't have to go in capture. You just kill them. That's why Russians can easily kill Zelensky. The Russians can easily kill the whole thing, including the Rada. Why? You don't want to do this, aggressive, Russians. No, let's prolong the agony for these guys and see what they do. But Russia has all technical means to turn Europe into the parking lot. And
so on that point, you mentioned earlier in this episode that Russia, it's not just wordsmithing when they say a special military operation as opposed to a war, because those have physical meanings changing in the economy or whatever. Right now, they're in the special military operations zone, and they have enough capacity. And already with artillery shells, they're vastly outproducing the United States. Military drones, certainly missiles of various kinds, completely outpacing everybody else. But if Russia went to a full mobilization, a war mobilization, because they felt a threat from NATO, how long would it take them to do that? And would that give Russia the capacity to actually roll west if they needed to?
Yeah, you have immediate mobilization pool, immediate, not volunteers, but immediate mobilization pool of 2.5 million people. Russia can fully put them under the bayonets, furbish them, feed them, uniform them, train them. So it will take probably, depending on how you want to spread your, so to speak, mobilization potential. Probably some already have been in rotation and already went to the civilian life. And so you will immediately draft those people because their combat preparation, developing the combat cohesion of the formations, things like that will be much shorter. They are already prepared, basically professional pool. The rest of it will be, getting trained and basically put together as the military formation. So you will have immediately probably the army of the 3.5 million. So
and then,
yeah,
and then for the economy and their defense industrial base, how
Well,
long would
what-
it take to get
yeah.
fully ramped up?
Yeah, then we are looking at something, astonishing in terms of the scale, because many things will be nationalized immediately. Russia already has a lot of nationalized, basically, industrial plant, so to speak, in companies which are strategic in nature. And yes, the war also tells you, as I already stated, war is a completely different set of the operational strategic documents. You obviously need to pull up the, like manuals and things like that. Russians also fight with manuals as Americans, but there are different manuals, but of course you need to pull out. And suddenly you have different ratios of the civilian casualties allowed. You have different ratios of your own casualties to be taken in. Everything changes, including considering the mobilizational potential, which becomes kinetic essentially. And then you have the industry getting really in the military production. And once that happens,
so that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's something that no one in the West has talked about that I've seen at all. That the calculations change and the ratios with acceptable losses would change, et cetera, on the both sides. But so just pick a number. 6 months before, if Russia needed to, they could be at that level, industrialized as well as the manpower. Okay. Now let me ask you, as an analyst, how long would it take the West to match that level of comparatives if they calculated that a conventional war was necessary?
Years. And I'm talking about, even if it's even possible, probably 5-6 years at least, but they're not going to match it, because here is the other part which many people do not understand. European part of NATO, their military, technologically, they lag behind Russia, not by generation, 2 generations of the military technology. Table of Organization and Equipment, TOE. This is who they are. They have no serious air defense. They have no serious air forces. They have no serious command and control structure. They don't have, remove United States, what do you have? You have 3 SCO satellites by France. This is a joke. They lose completely, practically, early warning and real battlefield, real-time ISR. It's all United States. Remove United States from this, then they will never match it to start with. Will United States go and defend them? No, I don't think so. So we have a complete reshaping of the potential battlefield. But the problem, as I already stated, why the hell Russians need to go there? They have nothing to gain from Europe. That's the thing. That's what many people do not understand. Russians want to be left alone. And those people who do not understand them, let's get those guys from DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Pentagon, all those, generals, go visit Russia and see for yourself why Russians would go and take on themselves some crap holes in Europe and then support them, feed them, like Russians did with their, obviously, Berlin and Germany after defeat in 1945. Many people do not understand why Russians were starving, essentially, in Soviet Union. The already occupied Berlin have been supported by, you can see so many videos and, of that. Red Army was feeding Berliners and was feeding the other cities in defeated Germany. So, and the question is why? There's no reason.
Yeah, it would be almost all cost and no benefit for
Yeah.
Russia. So in the last few minutes we got here, that's what could happen if everybody got stupid. We went at a new level. Of course, obviously, if you go there, then the risk of nuclear escalation would just go off the charts. So nobody should even think about that.
Yeah.
But so since Russia knows all those things, just few on the West do. But everything you just said here has to be common knowledge among the Russian military and political elite, at least. So then the question comes in now, then the situation here. Russia wants to keep it at a special military operation level. They don't want to go to general war level. And they don't want to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my assessment is that Russia does not want to have a negotiated settlement that leaves a Ukraine army intact, that leaves the Zelensky regime intact, et cetera.
Yeah.
So if they don't get that in negotiations, then the military option is left. In your estimate, how long might it take them to get to the point to where the Ukraine military literally collapses? I mean, we talking 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half? What do you think?
Difficult to say. It obviously depends on what will be the push. Russians can do the push because Russia never actually lost the operational initiative. Operational initiative being the ability to actually conduct offensive operations on several operational axes. Russians always had this. It's just that now it's, I know they killed a lot of best troops, Ukrainian troops in Chasiv Yar. Now we have obviously Kursk, couple months. 2025 toll is already stated. First, knowledge. They know officers in general staff and those friends and all. They say 2025. Most of it, first half at least, will be the combat. That will be the combat operations. So Russians will conduct the combat operations until through June. When will their evaporate to resist? Well, considering how they throw those people, that meat, essentially cannon fodder, at the meat grinder, they probably can endure another few months, 3-4 months, but they are already running out of the cannon fodder. They really do.
Yeah, and it's just in one hand is a testimony to the Ukrainian bravery, but it's also a perverse bravery because they're continuing to fight when the war is clearly already decided. It's definitely going to be a Ukraine loss. The only question is how bad will it be? And it could get a lot worse. And part of me just does not understand why they would continue to fight when it is clear it's lost.
They are forced now, essentially. Yeah, they are forced now. They are really forced. If you look attentively at that, even the uber-liberal, US aid-financed Russian opposition, they're not opposition, they're assets, media like Medusa, they publish now what essentially happening. It's concentration camp. You cannot go out on the street if you are a man. You will be immediately taken in, no questions asked. You will be packed. There are so many videos demonstrating this.
Yeah,
that's what they are. Then they pump them with the drugs. They are, Ukrainian army today is drugged. They have the barrier troops, especially foreign advisors, quote unquote, are excellent as barrier troops. They shoot them when they try to retreat, and they shoot them when they try to go and surrender. So, and how many have been killed like this? We don't even know what is happening in terms of the casualties and tactical and operational rear. We know the numbers are massive. And so, they essentially, they commit national suicide. And Russia said, okay, if you want to, we will oblige, we will.
It's really terrible situation from a humanitarian perspective.
From a humanitarian point of view, absolutely. Nobody enjoys that.
But listen, we nevertheless really appreciate your expertise here today and letting us know all this stuff. It's been a fabulous episode, and I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And to those who want to get more of Martyanov here, go to his website. It's Smoothie X 12, is it?
Yeah, Smoothie X12. And I already spoke about the story behind this moniker. It has nothing to do with you know what. I take $2.99 a minute. So
all right, we'll go there if you want more of it, because it's there, and we go there sometimes as well. So thank you very much for coming on. We look forward to seeing you back again.
My pleasure, Danny. Anytime. My pleasure.
And we thank you guys very much too. Be sure to join us either 3:30 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. There's a meeting with Netanyahu and Trump at the White House, and we'll bring you all the breaking news on that as soon as it breaks. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.